The laughter came first, rolling through the packed conference hall as cameras panned toward the small girl holding the microphone. She stood alone near the aisle, 12 years old, her shoes scuffed, her blazer clearly borrowed. The tech summit was live-streamed to millions, and the audience expected a joke, not a moment. On stage, the CEO smiled broadly, amused that a child had been allowed to interrupt his polished presentation. He leaned toward the host and nodded, giving permission like a man indulging a harmless distraction. To him, this was entertainment. "Go on," the CEO said into the mic, his voice light, almost playful. "Tell us what you wanted to ask." More laughter followed, sharper this time, as if the room had already decided the outcome. The girl adjusted her grip on the microphone, feeling its weight, feeling the eyes on her skin. She did not smile back, and that alone unsettled a few people in the front row. The CEO noticed it too, though he did not yet understand why. She spoke quietly at first, forcing the room to lean in. Then she raised her other hand, holding up a small device with a cracked screen. The laughter faded, replaced by an uneasy silence that spread faster than applause ever could. The conference hall smelled of polished concrete, electronics, and ambition. Outside, the Los Angeles skyline gleamed under the noon sun, a silent testament to wealth and power. Inside, hundreds of attendees were seated in crisp suits and designer dresses, buzzing with anticipation for the annual Tech Innovators Summit. At the center of it all was Yalan Montgomery, CAO of Montech, whose reputation as a visionary was rivaled only by whispers of arrogance and ruthless competitiveness. He had built a billion-dollar empire, and tonight, he was about to demonstrate why everyone called him untouchable. 12-year-old Amara Thompson sat in the very last row, her worn backpack at her feet, clutching a tablet that had been her mother's only splurge that month. Amara had grown up in South Los Angeles in a two-bedroom apartment where three siblings shared a single bedroom. Her mother worked double shifts at a hospital as a respiratory therapist, her father gone years ago. Money was always scarce. Bills piled high, food stretched thin, but one thing Amara had always been allowed to chase was her curiosity. She had a mind that absorbed code snippets like water soaking into a sponge. Apps, programs, AI models, she devoured everything she could access on her mother's second-hand tablet. Her invitation to Montech Summit came as a surprise. One of the non-profit sponsors had recommended her for a youth innovation showcase, unaware that the demo would place her in the center of a room full of industry giants, all expecting entertainment, not brilliance. She had spent the past week rehearsing, ensuring her project, a machine learning algorithm that analyzed school cafeteria menus to optimize nutrition and reduce waste, ran smoothly on the tablet. Yet even as she prepared, a knot of nerves clenched her stomach. This wasn't just about showing her skills. This was about proving she belonged in a world built for people with money, power, and connections. Behind the scenes, Yalan Montgomery leaned back in his leather chair, sipping an overpriced espresso, reviewing the presentations on his tablet. His assistant whispered last-minute adjustments, and he smirked at the schedule. "Let's see how the kids handle the spotlight," he said under his breath, more amused than concerned. To him, youth innovation was a spectacle, a predictable segment to entertain the press. Rarely did anyone in his empire actually succeed on their own terms. Most of the so-called prodigies fumbled or were coached beyond recognition. Tonight would be no different, he thought. Meanwhile, Amara's mother, Celeste Thompson, paced in the hall outside, checking her watch every few seconds. She had insisted Amara attend, quietly urging her to seize the opportunity, but the weight of expectation pressed down on both of them. Her fingers brushed over the laminated ID badge she had printed herself, nervous that the wealthy crowd would dismiss her daughter before she even spoke. Amara, seated in the back, felt her pulse quicken as the hall lights dimmed and the audience's chatter faded into silence. The spotlight on the stage caught a glittering reflection off the polished Montech logo. The host called out Amara's name with a forced cheerfulness that drew laughter and some polite applause from the audience. A few executives leaned forward, curious but skeptical, their smiles tight. Amara stood, her knees trembling slightly, and clutched her tablet. The stage felt impossibly vast and the audience seemed impossibly tall. Montgomery himself approached the podium with a measured stride, his eyes scanning the room before landing on her. He raised an eyebrow, lips curling in a thin, mocking smile. "Ah, yes," he said, voice carry across the hall. "The young prodigy from South LA, why don't you come up here and show us what all the fuss is about?" The words dripped with amusement, as if he were already imagining her failing. She swallowed hard, feeling the room shrink around her. 200 pairs of eyes trained on a 12-year-old girl in a simple hoodie and sneakers. She could hear whispers. What could she possibly know? This is going to be entertaining. She stepped forward, tablet in hand, and felt the stage lights scorch her vision. But deep inside, the knowledge she had gained over countless nights of self-teaching began to crystallize into courage. She wasn't just here to be looked at, she was here to reveal something hidden. Something that Montgomery had spent years burying. Montgomery gestured toward the massive screen behind him, which flickered to life with a preloaded demo video. "Let's see your project in action," he said, voice calm but sharp, as if daring her to fail publicly. The audience leaned in. The video played, but Amara immediately noticed something odd. The dataset on the screen was incomplete. It wasn't her work. Someone had replaced her carefully curated model with a generic template, designed to fail under scrutiny. A collective chuckle rippled through the audience as the video displayed errors and flawed predictions. Montgomery's smile widened, eyes glinting with triumph. Interesting," he said. "Looks like the algorithm could use more work." Amara's stomach twisted. The applause that followed was mocking, the kind that stung more than silence. She could see the smirk on the faces of the executives, the reporters tapping notes into their devices, the cameras capturing her stumble. It was all meant to humiliate her. But as she looked down at her tablet, she realized she didn't need to follow the script that had been forced upon her. She knew the truth about her code, every line, every function, every calculation. As she also knew the secret file Montgomery had buried to hide his own oversight. An internal report revealing that Montech had used underpaid interns to build key AI modules while he claimed them as his own innovation. Her pulse steadied. The fear began to shift into clarity. The audience didn't know what they were about to witness. She tapped her tablet, bypassing the demo video, and opened the hidden files stored in the system, something Montgomery assumed no child could access. Every executive leaned forward. Every camera zoomed. Every whispered comment in the audience died. The file contained undeniable proof, financial records, project reports, and email threads showing that Montgomery had systematically taken credit for work that was not his own. Disguising interns' contributions as proprietary technology, the room's temperature seemed to drop. Montgomery's amusement faltered, a flicker of panic crossing his face as he realized the file was being projected onto the massive screen behind him. The audience gasped. Journalists murmured, whispering to each other, the energy in the hall shifting from mockery to astonishment. A 12-year-old girl in a simple hoodie and worn sneakers had just exposed the hidden truth behind the empire everyone assumed flawless. She felt a quiet satisfaction, not pride, as she read the numbers and emails aloud, her voice small but unwavering. Montgomery's face turned pale. He leaned toward his assistant, whispering, but the words were lost to the hall. The crowd's attention was entirely on Amara. The file laid bare months, even years of deception, fraud, and exploitation. She spoke with precision, highlighting the exact moments when credit had been stolen. The names of the interns erased from recognition, the emails where warnings had been ignored. Every word landed like a hammer strike. The audience could see, read, and hear the truth, and nothing Montgomery could do would stop it. By the time she finished, silence hung over the room, heavy and electric. The mockery was gone. Every eye was on a child who had refused to be small, who had refused to let lies stand unchallenged. Amara closed the file, looked at Montgomery, and said simply, "You can't hide the truth. Not anymore." The words reverberated, echoing far beyond the hall, into every camera lens, every streaming device, every tweet that would be written before the day ended. And for the first time, Montgomery understood that the empire he had built on control and image could crumble with nothing more than honesty, courage, and a single file that should never have been accessed. The next morning, the summit's aftermath was already swirling online. Headlines flashed across screens. 12-year-old exposes tech giant's deception, and Montech CEO caught in intern credit scandal. Amara woke to her mother's trembling hands holding her tablet, showing the endless notifications. Even before she had fully brushed her hair or eaten breakfast, her phone buzzed with interview requests, sponsorship offers, and congratulations from people she had never met. It was surreal, almost dreamlike, but there was no time to revel in it. The day had barely begun, and the magnitude of what she had uncovered demanded careful thought. Montgomery, meanwhile, was in his sleek corner office atop the Montech Tower, pacing with increasing agitation. His assistant Margot hovered nervously, holding a folder with damage control strategies. "Sir, the media's calling. Investors are asking for statements." "Should we?" He cut her off with a harsh wave of his hand. "No, stop, don't speak. Not yet. Let them stew in uncertainty. Let the story develop, then we control it." But control, he quickly realized, was slipping through his fingers. Every journalist had access to the file, every news outlet had already verified the documents. He had underestimated the child. He had underestimated her determination across the city. Amara attended her first media interview with a small production crew in a quiet studio. The questions ranged from the usual, "How did you feel?" to more pointed inquiries like, "Do you think Montgomery should be held accountable?" Amara answered with poise beyond her years, detailing the process she had used to uncover the file and explaining how the algorithm had originally been hers. Her words were measured, her reasoning clear. Every sentence reinforced the image of a child not just gifted, but principled. Her mother, standing behind the cameras, felt her chest tighten. Pride and fear mingled. She knew the attention could bring both opportunity and danger. Montgomery's phone never stopped ringing. Calls from board members, lawyers, and PR consultants demanded immediate action. He realized that hiding behind the empire's glossy image was no longer viable. Emails were leaked to reporters detailing how interns had been systematically denied recognition, how financial reports had been falsified to mask their contributions. Montgomery's allies began to distance themselves subtly, careful to protect their own reputations. The walls of Montech's empire, built on charisma, secrecy, and fear, began to tremble. Amara's school life became a whirlwind in parallel. Teachers congratulated her, classmates stared, and some older students whispered rumors she couldn't yet fully comprehend. Yet, despite the sudden fame, she remained grounded. She spent hours reviewing her project, ensuring that her work could be replicated independently and that any potential errors were documented transparently. Integrity had always been her guiding principle, and now, with the world watching, she felt it even more acutely. Each decision she made, every public statement needed to be flawless. She could not allow mistakes to overshadow the truth she had revealed. Montgomery attempted subtle maneuvers behind the scenes. He called meetings with his senior executives, suggesting shifts in strategy to mitigate damage. "We need to spin this," he said sharply. "Highlight our philanthropy. Distract with new product launches. Make it about innovation, not deception." Yet every plan he proposed was undermined by the viral footage of Amara exposing the hidden files. Investors were uneasy. Partners questioned loyalty. The public had shifted perception overnight. What had seemed a minor embarrassment transformed into a crisis threatening the very foundation of his empire. Meanwhile, Amara began receiving messages from other young innovators inspired by her courage. Some were students from local schools, others were teenagers from across the country. All wanted guidance, mentorship, or simply reassurance that their voices mattered. Amara felt a sense of responsibility more weighty than any trophy or headline. She arranged small virtual meetings, answering questions patiently, teaching code snippets, and explaining methods to protect intellectual property. Each conversation reminded her that the world she was navigating was not just about fame. It was about using knowledge and courage to effect real change. Montgomery, now fully aware of the threat to his legacy, decided to confront the situation head-on. He scheduled a press conference at Montec headquarters aiming to reclaim control over the narrative. His prepared statement emphasized innovation, mentorship, and corporate responsibility. He acknowledged the intern's contributions but couched it in carefully worded phrases, designed to minimize personal accountability. Yet the moment he stepped onto the podium, reporters pressed with pointed questions about the leaked emails and internal files. Montgomery's rehearsed charm faltered under the intensity. The evidence was undeniable, and the public sensed it during this period. Amara's personal life continued to intertwine with the escalating drama. Her best friend Jordan became her sounding board. "You changed everything," he said one afternoon, watching news coverage in their neighborhood park. "But what if he tries to fight back?" Amara, thoughtful, tapped her tablet. "He will," she replied quietly, "but truth doesn't need permission to exist. And people will see it." The words, simple yet profound, captured the resolve that had carried her through the summit. She had faced the full weight of a billionaire's mockery and emerged unbroken in the ensuing days. Montec's board held emergency sessions. Discussions centered on financial audits, internal accountability, and damage control. Some executives pushed for Montgomery's resignation, fearing the company's valuation and public image would suffer irreparably. Others remained loyal, convinced that his vision was too integral to risk replacement. The tension within the company was palpable. Hallways that had once echoed with confident footsteps now carried whispers of doubt, uncertainty, and fear. Amara, aware of the increasing scrutiny on Montec, began documenting her experience. She kept detailed notes, screenshots, and email threads, anticipating the long-term battle over recognition and ethics. She also became the subject of mentorship offers, scholarships, and coding workshops. Invitations to speak at youth conferences poured in, and yet she remained careful. Fame was not her goal. Justice, accountability, and innovation were. Each opportunity was weighed not just for its prestige but for its alignment with her principles. Montgomery attempted to leverage media allies, hoping to divert attention to Montec's upcoming product launch. Press releases highlighted futuristic AI applications and global partnerships. Yet every article inevitably mentioned Amara, the 12-year-old who had unmasked the truth. Social media amplified her story, creating viral threads of admiration, analysis, and debate. The world seemed captivated by the audacity, intelligence, and morality of a child who had refused to be silenced. Legal advisors became involved as interns, who had been overlooked stepped forward. Lawsuits and potential settlements loomed, all supported by the evidence Amara had inadvertently unearthed. Montgomery faced a growing tide of accountability that no strategic maneuvering could fully contain. Even as he presented himself confidently in interviews, the subtle cracks in his public persona became evident. People began questioning the culture of Montec, the ethics of its leadership, and the systemic practices that had allowed credit theft to flourish unnoticed. Amara's personal growth during this period was remarkable. She learned to navigate public attention, media scrutiny, and ethical dilemmas, all while maintaining the poise and integrity that had defined her actions at the summit. She spent hours analyzing corporate data, refining algorithms, and mentoring others, balancing the responsibilities thrust upon her with the challenges of a typical preteen life. Every interaction, every decision, reinforced her emerging identity as someone who could influence change without compromising her values. Montgomery, despite all his efforts, was increasingly isolated. Longtime partners hesitated to appear in interviews, employees quietly expressed dissatisfaction, and former interns sought acknowledgement and reparations. The empire he had built on charisma and control faced scrutiny from every direction. His attempts at narrative control were thwarted by the transparency Amara had inadvertently championed. Each press release, each video interview, only highlighted the contrast between his ambition and the ethical clarity of a child who had refused to be intimidated. By the end of the first week after the summit, the situation had escalated to the point that even corporate lawyers were advising Montgomery to consider a formal apology and structural changes within Montec. Investor confidence wavered and public trust reached historic lows. All the while, Amara continued her schoolwork, mentorship sessions, and personal projects, balancing the extraordinary circumstances with the ordinary demands of a 12-year-old life. She remained the embodiment of resilience, intelligence, and ethical clarity. A stark contrast to the once unquestioned authority of Montec's CEO. The following week felt like a whirlwind for Amara. Invitations to speak at tech workshops, panels, and youth forums poured in, each accompanied by requests for interviews and collaborations. Yet she moved carefully, consulting her mother and Jordan before agreeing to any commitments. Fame was enticing, but she remembered the lessons of the summit, the mockery, the underestimation, the buried file. Every step now required thought, patience, and strategy. Montgomery, on the other hand, was crumbling under pressure. His once commanding presence at Montec meetings now carried tension and defensiveness. Every glance from his executives seemed to scrutinize his judgment, and whispers about resignation circulated quietly but persistently. Legal counsel warned that the intern's lawsuits, combined with the media coverage, could result in a financial and reputational disaster. The Montec empire, built over decades, teetered on the brink of public disapproval and corporate collapse. Meanwhile, Amara began to notice subtle shifts in her social environment. Some peers who had previously dismissed her now looked at her with awe, envy, or curiosity. Teachers treated her with a newfound respect, and other students sought her guidance, both academically and personally. Despite this, she maintained humility. She refused to let the sudden attention dictate her identity or her values. Her focus remained clear: ensure the truth she uncovered was acknowledged, and protect the integrity of her work. Montgomery, desperate for damage control, attempted to manipulate public perception through strategic philanthropy. He launched a scholarship fund for young tech innovators, emphasizing mentorship and opportunity. Press releases framed this as an initiative inspired by Amara's exceptional contributions, but the public was not easily swayed. The narrative was no longer about generosity, it was about accountability, transparency, and the courage of a 12-year-old who refused to be silenced. Amara, sensing the shifting tides, continued her meticulous documentation. She organized the evidence from the summit, compiling emails, screenshots, and algorithmic data into an accessible archive. Her goal was not revenge but clarity. She wanted the truth to remain visible, organized, and verifiable. Jordan assisted her, often staying late in her room to help sort through information and brainstorm how to present her findings to wider audiences responsibly. Montgomery's desperation escalated further. He called private meetings with influential media contacts, attempting to spin the story in his favor. Focus on her age, he instructed. Emphasize that she's a child. Downplay the technical complexity. Make it seem like a lucky stumble. Yet these tactics backfired. Tech analysts and public commentators celebrated Amara's intelligence, emphasizing her methodical approach, ethical clarity, and problem-solving skills. Every attempt to diminish her achievements only amplified them. As Montec's internal turmoil grew, Amara continued to balance schoolwork, public appearances, and mentorship. She often found herself exhausted, but she refused to slow down. Her clarity of purpose gave her energy that belied her age. Even during long nights, she analyzed algorithms, refined her coding, and reviewed media coverage to ensure accuracy in her statements. Her mother, though anxious, supported every decision, marveling at the maturity her daughter displayed under pressure. Montgomery's efforts to regain control were further complicated by internal dissent. Executives who had once followed his directives without question now voiced concerns about corporate ethics, employee treatment, and long-term sustainability. Some argued that resignation would allow Montec to rebuild trust and prevent further lawsuits. Others feared that removing Montgomery would destabilize the company. The tension was palpable, and every decision he made was scrutinized relentlessly. Amara, recognizing the broader implications of her discovery, decided to reach out to the interns who had been marginalized. She encouraged them to share their work, ensured their contributions were credited, and helped connect them with industry mentors. Her actions fostered a network of young innovators who felt empowered to assert their rights and pursue their ambitions. Amara's influence extended beyond her immediate circle, creating ripples across the tech community that would have lasting effects. Montgomery, increasingly isolated, attempted a direct approach. He scheduled a private meeting with Amara, hoping to negotiate a truce or at least gauge her willingness to cooperate. The encounter, however, was tense and revealing. Amara remained composed, polite, but firm. "I'm not here to negotiate," she said. "I'm here to ensure the truth is recognized and that everyone who contributed is credited." Montgomery's attempts at charm and intimidation fell flat. He realized that the child before him was not only brilliant but unyielding in principle. Media coverage intensified. News outlets analyzed every detail of the leaked files, dissected Montgomery's past decisions, and highlighted Amara's meticulous documentation. Viral threads debated corporate ethics, the responsibilities of leadership, and the importance of recognizing contributions at every level. Public sentiment overwhelmingly favored transparency and accountability. Montgomery's reputation, once untouchable, suffered irreparable damage. While Amara's image as a principled young innovator grew stronger by the day, Amara also began exploring new projects. Inspired by her experience, she developed tools to help young innovators protect their work, ensuring that algorithms, designs, and creative projects could be securely archived and credited. These initiatives attracted attention from educational institutions, tech startups, and innovation hubs, further solidifying her influence. Despite the growing attention, she remained grounded, prioritizing purpose over recognition. Montgomery's position became increasingly untenable. Board members, aware of the mounting legal and reputational risks, pressured him to step down. Employees quietly expressed dissatisfaction, hinting that his leadership no longer reflected Montech's values. The company's image had shifted dramatically, from a symbol of innovation to an emblem of unchecked authority, only rectified through transparency and ethical accountability. Montgomery, once confident in his control, now faced the stark reality of diminished power. Amara's story inspired countless others. Young innovators from different cities began sharing their own projects, seeking guidance and collaboration. The tech community, often criticized for exclusivity and gatekeeping, began to embrace inclusivity, transparency, and mentorship. Amara's courage had not only challenged a powerful individual, but also sparked a movement that reshaped attitudes toward recognition. Ethics and youth contribution in the tech world. In her personal life, Amara navigated the balance between extraordinary circumstances and normal adolescence. She still attended school, completed homework, and spent evenings with Jordan and her mother. Yet every interaction, every conversation was now viewed through the lens of her newfound visibility. She remained humble, aware that her actions carried weight, and determined to use her influence responsibly. Montgomery, finally acknowledging the reality of his situation, issued a public apology. The statement was carefully worded, emphasizing mentorship, corporate responsibility, and lessons learned. However, the apology was met with mixed reactions. While some accepted it, many saw it as insufficient, a calculated attempt to salvage reputation rather than an authentic acknowledgement of wrongdoing. The contrast between Montgomery's polished statements and Amara's transparent actions further reinforced public perception of integrity versus pretense. As the weeks unfolded, Montech began implementing structural changes. Leadership teams expanded oversight, interns received proper recognition, and policies were updated to prevent future oversights. While Montgomery remained a figurehead, his authority was diminished, and the company culture shifted toward accountability. Amara's role, though indirect, was pivotal. Her discovery and subsequent actions catalyzed the transformation, demonstrating the power of courage, intelligence, and moral clarity to effect systemic change. Amara, reflecting on the journey, realized the magnitude of what she had accomplished. She had faced ridicule, navigated media scrutiny, and challenged one of the most powerful tech figures in the world, all at 12 years old. Yet her focus remained on the future, supporting other young innovators, refining her skills, and continuing to advocate for ethical practices in tech. Her experience became a blueprint for others, showing that age, status, or power were not barriers to truth and justice. Montgomery, once the epitome of control and authority, now navigated a world where his decisions were constantly scrutinized, his actions questioned and his legacy uncertain. The child he had underestimated had not only revealed hidden truths, but reshaped the narrative surrounding an entire corporation. The lessons were clear: integrity, transparency, and courage could outlast wealth, power, and reputation when wielded wisely. The momentum Amara had built showed no signs of slowing. Invitations to conferences and tech panels became a daily occurrence, and her inbox overflowed with messages from innovators, mentors, and enthusiasts around the globe. Yet she remained deliberate, refusing to overextend herself. Every acceptance was strategic, every response thoughtful. She had learned early that visibility without purpose could dilute impact. In school, Amara became a quiet source of inspiration. Younger students sought her guidance not just in academics, but in navigating the social dynamics that often undermined young innovators. She offered mentorship with patience and humility, never flaunting her achievements, always emphasizing effort, ethics, and perseverance. Teachers who had once doubted her abilities began to rely on her insights for classroom projects, while her peers respected the balance she maintained between brilliance and approachability. Montgomery's struggle continued, now compounded by the mounting lawsuits and internal investigations. Legal teams pored over contracts, employee testimonies, and the internal communication logs that Amara had helped make public. Each revelation revealed patterns of negligence, favoritism, and dismissal of young talent. Media outlets dissected the findings, fueling public discourse about corporate accountability. Montgomery, who had once ruled with confidence and intimidation, now found himself navigating a labyrinth of scrutiny. Unable to control the narrative he had once dominated, Amara, however, kept her focus on solutions rather than spectacle. She began collaborating with nonprofits and educational institutions to create programs that encouraged young people from underrepresented communities to engage in technology. Coding workshops, mentorship programs, and competitions became platforms to cultivate talent and instill ethical responsibility. Her initiatives emphasized transparency, intellectual ownership, and the importance of acknowledging contributions, a direct response to the environment she had faced at the summit. Montgomery, desperate to regain credibility, attempted a new approach, leveraging technology to showcase innovation within Montech. He launched an internal competition for algorithmic solutions to pressing social problems, framing it as a step toward corporate renewal. Yet the initiative felt hollow. Employees and the public quickly noticed the contrast between performative gestures and the systemic issues that remained unresolved. Amara's continued influence made it clear that integrity and action carried more weight than optics and statements. Amara's growing reputation drew attention from international tech forums. Invitations arrived from conferences in Europe, Asia, and North America, each offering platforms for her to speak about innovation, ethics, and the power of youth. While travel was daunting for someone her age, her parents in Jordan helped her manage the logistics. Each presentation reinforced the message that ethical responsibility and courage were just as important as technical skill. Back at Montech, tensions reached a peak. Some executives advocated for Montgomery's resignation, warning that prolonged leadership under scrutiny could irreparably damage the company. Others feared a leadership vacuum that could destabilize operations. Meetings became tense, alliances shifted, and every decision was second-guessed. The company culture, once dominated by fear and hierarchy, now leaned toward accountability and inclusivity, a transformation catalyzed indirectly by the 12-year-old, who refused to be silenced. Amara, mindful of her own boundaries, began working on a second project inspired by the summit experience. She designed a secure platform that allowed young innovators to document their ideas, track contributions, and protect intellectual property. The platform included mentorship features, ethical guidelines, and public recognition tools. Jordan assisted in testing prototypes, gathering feedback from peers, and ensuring that the interface was both accessible and intuitive. The project quickly attracted attention from educators, tech incubators, and global youth organizations. Montgomery's attempts to undermine her efforts, whether through subtle media campaigns or corporate messaging, proved futile. The public had already aligned with Amara's principles, seeing her as a symbol of integrity, competence, and courage. Every effort to discredit her inadvertently reinforced her narrative. Analysts highlighted how Montec's internal oversight had failed, praising Amara for exposing flaws, while maintaining a vision for constructive change. The ripple effects extended beyond Montec. Other corporations began reviewing their practices regarding youth engagement, intellectual property, and transparency. Conferences featured panels discussing how to nurture young talent without exploitation. Articles highlighted success stories of interns, young innovators, and ethical mentors. Amara's influence had created a paradigm shift. Accountability, respect, and empowerment were no longer optional. They were expected. In her personal life, Amara faced the challenges of adolescence alongside her rising public profile. Friendships deepened, and she nurtured connections with peers who shared her passion for innovation. Jordan became an indispensable ally, helping her navigate both social dynamics and the complexities of growing recognition. Together they brainstormed solutions to challenges, celebrated milestones, and reminded each other of the importance of humility amidst success. Montgomery, confronted with mounting legal pressures, public scrutiny, and internal dissent, began to realize the magnitude of the reckoning. His attempts at public apologies, philanthropy, and internal reforms seemed reactive rather than proactive. Each move was scrutinized by a public now deeply invested in transparency. Even his allies questioned whether he could genuinely guide Montec toward recovery. The contrast between his reactive strategy and Amara's proactive, principled approach became a central narrative in media coverage. Amara's influence extended into mentorship networks, where she encouraged young innovators to think critically about their ideas, protect their intellectual contributions, and engage ethically in competitive environments. Her workshops emphasized problem-solving, collaboration, and moral clarity, teaching participants not just technical skills but also the responsibility that comes with influence. Feedback from attendees highlighted her clarity, patience, and ability to inspire confidence even in those far older than her. Montec's board convened repeatedly to address the cascading consequences of the summit revelations. Lawsuits were settled, internal audits conducted, and structural reforms initiated. Transparency became a core pillar of the organization, and executives who had previously ignored ethical considerations now took active roles in mentoring, oversight, and inclusion. The transformation, while slow, was profound, driven largely by the awareness raised by a child who refused to let injustice go unnoticed. Amara's journey also sparked broader societal conversations. News outlets ran features on youth-led innovation, ethics in technology, and corporate accountability. Social media campaigns celebrated young inventors and ethical leadership, while parents and educators sought guidance on nurturing talent responsibly. The summit incident, initially a source of embarrassment for Montgomery, became a catalyst for systemic change across industries. Even as recognition grew, Amara remained grounded. She continued her studies, balanced personal interests, and prioritized ethical practice over accolades. Her mother and Jordan reminded her that impact mattered more than fame, and that consistent, principled action created lasting change. This mindset allowed Amara to navigate opportunities and pressures with grace, focusing on meaningful contributions rather than fleeting recognition. Montgomery, increasingly isolated, faced the inevitable. Public opinion had shifted irrevocably, and his attempts at redemption were viewed through a lens of skepticism. The contrast between his reactive strategies and Amara's proactive, principled initiatives became a textbook example in media discussions about leadership, accountability, and the consequences of underestimating youth. By now, Amara had become more than just a tech prodigy. She was a symbol of ethical innovation, resilience, and the power of youth to challenge entrenched systems. Her influence extended beyond Montec, shaping conversations about mentorship, intellectual property, and ethical responsibility across industries. The ripple effects of her courage would be felt for years, inspiring young innovators to pursue excellence without compromising their values. Despite the growing attention, Amara maintained balance in her life. She continued coding, designing projects, and mentoring peers, all while remaining committed to her studies. She understood that sustainable impact required consistency, patience, and integrity. Every decision, from public appearances to project development, reflected careful consideration of long-term consequences and ethical responsibility. Montgomery's empire, once untouchable, now operated under new principles. Oversight committees, transparency initiatives, and mentorship programs became standard practices. While the company retained its market presence, its culture had shifted dramatically, acknowledging the lessons imposed by the events of the summit. Amara's indirect influence had transformed the Montec from a symbol of unchecked authority to a model of accountability and ethical innovation. Through it all, Amara remained committed to fostering a community of young innovators who understood the importance of ethics, responsibility, and recognition. She continued to develop platforms and workshops designed to protect intellectual contributions, ensure mentorship, and promote collaboration. Her efforts provided a blueprint for nurturing talent without exploitation, legacy far more enduring than any temporary recognition or accolade. As the year progressed, Amara reflected on the journey. She had faced mockery, scrutiny, and the challenges of navigating influence at a young age. Yet she had emerged not just as a tech prodigy, but as a principled leader, mentor, and advocate for ethical innovation. Her story demonstrated that courage, intelligence, and integrity could effect meaningful change, even in the face of immense power and entrenched systems. Montgomery, confronted with the irreversible consequences of his actions, became a cautionary example. The mistakes of his summit, combined with his reactive strategies, highlighted the importance of transparency, mentorship, and recognition. In contrast, Amara's journey illustrated how principled action, guided by integrity and purpose, could shape culture, inspire communities, and leave a lasting impact. Amara's reputation continued to grow, yet she never let it define her. She remained the same thoughtful, diligent young girl who had refused to stay silent at the summit. Every interview she gave, every panel she spoke on, emphasized not just innovation, but responsibility and insistence that young creators must protect their ideas and remain ethically grounded. No matter how powerful the audience or intimidating the stage, Montgomery, increasingly aware of the depth of his failure, tried desperately to reclaim credibility. He attempted public apologies, media statements, and token initiatives. Yet his efforts felt hollow, lacking the authenticity that Amara naturally embodied. Analysts pointed out the stark contrast. The CEO, who once humiliated a child, was now being held accountable by the very people he had underestimated. The public's attention had shifted, and his every move was dissected for sincerity, strategy, or manipulation. Meanwhile, Amara launched a new initiative that became a turning point. She partnered with schools and tech hubs across multiple countries to establish innovation circles, safe spaces where young inventors could present ideas, collaborate on projects, and receive mentorship. Each circle emphasized transparency, documentation, and ethical standards. Unlike traditional competitions, these spaces rewarded honesty, collaboration, and thoughtful problem-solving, ensuring that every participant received recognition for their contributions. Jordan worked closely with Amara to expand these circles. Together, they designed a mentorship program that paired students with professionals in their fields, ensuring that guidance was available but not exploitative. Feedback loops, ethics workshops, and progress tracking became integral components. The platform also included a secure filing system for ideas, protecting intellectual property and preventing theft or misattribution. Montgomery, observing these developments, attempted a reactionary move, a flashy scholarship initiative under Montec's brand. But unlike Amara's carefully crafted programs, his initiative was poorly executed and transparent in its intention to regain public favor. Participation was limited, oversight weak, and the media quickly exposed its flaws. Once again, Amara's authenticity and forward-thinking approach made his efforts look superficial. Amara's impact rippled further, when a global tech conference invited her as a keynote speaker. Standing on the stage, she addressed thousands of attendees, detailing her experiences, the importance of protecting young innovators, and the ethical responsibilities of corporations. Her speech was not just technical, it was deeply human, weaving personal anecdotes with actionable lessons. The audience, captivated by her poise and insight, responded with standing ovations, social media shares, and pledges to implement her methods in their own organizations. Back at Montech, internal morale shifted. Employees who had once feared Montgomery's unpredictability began seeing the potential of a more accountable, transparent culture. Discussions about ethical practices, mentorship, and recognition became routine. Teams developed internal protocols inspired by Amara's model, ensuring that contributions were acknowledged and that young or junior members could safely present ideas without fear of ridicule. The change, subtle at first, became irreversible. Amara, however, was not content to simply inspire change. She wanted measurable impact. She initiated a research project examining the correlation between ethical mentorship, youth engagement, and innovation outcomes. Surveys, interviews, and case studies highlighted patterns. Environments that valued recognition, transparency, and ethical guidance produced higher quality innovation and stronger collaboration. The results validated her approach, providing data that organizations and governments could use to implement systemic reforms. Montgomery, increasingly desperate, attempted to discredit her work by questioning methodology and bias. Yet even critics struggled to challenge the clarity, depth, and rigor of her research. Amara's team, composed of dedicated peers and mentors, had meticulously documented every process, every decision, and every outcome. Her work became a reference point for discussions on youth innovation, corporate responsibility, and ethical practices in technology. Outside of formal initiatives, Amara remained connected to her peers and local community. She organized workshops at community centers, encouraged participation in coding clubs, and celebrated the achievements of those often overlooked. These personal efforts, small yet significant, demonstrated her understanding that systemic change required attention to individual growth as much as large-scale programs. Montgomery's position deteriorated. Further, board members, once loyal, began questioning his judgment and leadership. Investors worried about long-term sustainability, given the company's shifting culture and public perception. The contrast between the CEO's reactive, performative approach and Amara's proactive, principled strategy became a case study in leadership failure. Internal debates about restructuring and succession intensified. And for the first time, Montech's leadership landscape felt uncertain. Amara, aware of the unfolding corporate shifts, continued her work with unwavering focus. She recognized that her responsibility extended beyond personal recognition. She had become a steward of ethical innovation. Every project she launched, every mentorship she offered, reinforced her vision. Young talent must be nurtured, protected, and empowered to make meaningful contributions without fear of exploitation. Her influence extended into media and policy circles. Journalists sought her opinion on youth empowerment, tech ethics, and corporate responsibility. Policymakers referenced her work when crafting guidelines for mentorship programs and intellectual property protections for minors. Schools integrated her principles into STEM curricula, ensuring that ethical considerations were taught alongside technical skills. Amara's voice had transcended her age, becoming a touchstone for broader societal change. Montgomery's attempts to regain stature were increasingly futile. Public campaigns to highlight innovation under his leadership were overshadowed by the authenticity of Amara's work. Media outlets contrasted her initiatives with his token gestures, illustrating how credibility stems from consistency, ethics, and transparency, not position or power. Every misstep reinforced the narrative that leadership required more than authority. It demanded responsibility. Amara's personal growth continued alongside her public achievements. She navigated friendships, school responsibilities, and the complexities of growing up under scrutiny with grace. Jordan remained her anchor, providing practical advice, emotional support, and collaborative energy. Together they celebrated milestones, problem-solved challenges, and kept one another grounded amidst mounting attention. Montec's transformation, while gradual, became undeniable. Transparency protocols, mentorship programs, and secure intellectual property systems became standard. Corporate culture shifted from hierarchical intimidation to collaborative accountability. Employees, especially younger ones, felt empowered to present ideas, challenge assumptions, and engage ethically. Amara's indirect influence had catalyzed systemic reform, creating a legacy that extended beyond her direct projects. As the year drew to a close, Amara reflected on the journey. The summit incident, initially a source of embarrassment and tension, had become the catalyst for a profound change within her community, and even a major corporation. She had demonstrated that courage, intelligence, and integrity could overcome intimidation, systemic flaws, and entrenched power. Her story served as a blueprint for young innovators and leaders, illustrating the transformative potential of principled action. Montgomery, now largely sidelined, faced the consequences of his earlier arrogance. While he retained a position in the company, his influence had waned. Lessons from the summit incident, combined with Amara's ongoing initiatives, left him as an example of how misjudgment and ethical failure can undermine even the most powerful individuals. Meanwhile, Amara's vision expanded. She planned international collaborations, cross-cultural mentorship programs, and digital platforms to further democratize innovation. Every initiative emphasized ethical engagement, intellectual protection, and recognition of effort. Her work became a template for nurturing talent in a way that was inclusive, responsible, and sustainable. Through it all, Amara maintained perspective. She understood that true impact was measured not in accolades but in the opportunities created for others. The systemic change achieved and the ethical standards reinforced. Her dedication inspired countless peers, mentors, and organizations to reimagine how youth engagement and innovation could be pursued responsibly. By the time the next summit rolled around, Amara had become a symbol, proof that one voice, one idea, and one principled action could reshape institutions, inspire communities, and redefine leadership. Montgomery, present only as a figure of reflection and caution, underscored the contrast between power without ethics and influence guided by integrity. The ripple effects of Amara's actions continued to expand. Schools, corporations, and community organizations implemented frameworks for mentorship and innovation protection. Policies were updated, awareness increased, and young innovators felt emboldened to take risks, innovate boldly, and hold themselves and their environments accountable. The legacy of a 12-year-old girl who refused to be humiliated had grown into a movement that valued ethics, courage, and fairness above all else. Even in moments of quiet reflection, Amara remained committed to growth. She coded new projects, mentored peers, and envisioned solutions that could bridge gaps in technology access and education. Every endeavor reinforced her guiding principle: brilliance paired with ethics has the power to transform not just individuals, but entire systems. As the final months of the year concluded, it was evident that Amara's journey had permanently altered the landscape. Montec's culture had shifted, youth mentorship had expanded globally, and the principles she championed had become embedded in multiple sectors. The summit incident, once a moment of ridicule, had been transformed into a catalyst for systemic, enduring change. Her story became one of empowerment, integrity, and resilience, a testament to the extraordinary potential within every young person when courage meets opportunity, and when intelligence is guided by ethics. Amara had not only defended her dignity, she had redefined what it meant to lead, innovate, and inspire. Amara stood on the stage once more, this time not as a child facing ridicule, but as a young innovator who had changed the rules of the game. The audience, a mixture of students, educators, tech professionals, and policymakers, waited in anticipation. She took a deep breath and began speaking, not about her personal triumph, but about the power of integrity, courage, and vision. "This isn't just my story," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "It's a story about every young mind that has ever been dismissed, underestimated, or mocked. It's about the potential that exists in all of us when we are given respect, opportunity, and guidance. And it's about what happens when we refuse to let fear, arrogance, or injustice silence us. Her words resonated deeply, echoing in every heart present. She reminded them of the summit where she had been humiliated, not to relive the pain, but to illustrate how challenges could become turning points. She spoke about the mentorship circles, the secure filing systems, and the programs that nurtured young innovators ethically and responsibly. She described how courage could transform systems, empower communities, and reshape the culture of even the most powerful institutions. Montgomery's downfall was a silent lesson in her narrative. He had underestimated the power of ethics, authenticity, and youth. The very CEO who thought a young girl could be mocked and dismissed became an example of failure born from arrogance and neglect. But Amara's story was never about revenge. It was about transformation. She had taken humiliation and turned it into an opportunity, not only for herself but for thousands of others. The impact of her work was tangible. Schools implemented her mentorship frameworks. Corporations adopted policies inspired by her initiatives, and communities began celebrating innovation in ways that emphasized ethics and fairness. Amara's research became a reference for policymakers, seeking to protect intellectual property for minors and ensure ethical engagement in STEM fields. Her influence had grown beyond borders, proving that one principled individual could leave a lasting legacy. Amara herself remained grounded. Despite the accolades, media attention, and growing responsibility, she continued to code, mentor, and learn. She valued the support of friends like Jordan, who reminded her that every achievement was built on collaboration and trust. Together they envisioned new projects, new programs, and new ways to give back, ensuring that the movement she started would continue to grow long after her story became widely known. Her journey also inspired young innovators globally. Stories of children and teens stepping forward, refusing to be silenced, and pursuing their ideas responsibly began to emerge. Communities celebrated ingenuity paired with integrity, and parents encouraged their children to embrace both courage and ethics in their pursuits. Amara's influence had become a ripple effect, spreading far beyond the summit, the corporations, and even the countries she directly worked in. Montgomery, now largely sidelined, remained in the corporate world but as a cautionary figure. His actions and the consequences that followed served as a reminder to leaders everywhere. The position alone could not command respect or inspire loyalty. True influence required consistency, ethics, and recognition of the human element in every endeavor. Amara's journey had exposed the limitations of arrogance and the boundless potential of principled leadership. As she looked back on everything, Amara realized that the most important lesson was about empowerment. Empowerment was not just about giving advice or sharing opportunities. It was about creating systems where respect, fairness, and ethical guidance were inherent. By building environments that nurtured young talent, she had created a culture that valued each individual's contribution and protected their growth. The summit, the humiliation, and the obstacles were all stepping stones to this larger purpose. The world began to take notice. Media outlets celebrated her initiatives as models for global innovation. Governments consulted her expertise for policy creation, and educational institutions integrated her frameworks into the STEM curricula. Amara's story became a blueprint not only for innovation but for moral leadership. Young people saw her as proof that integrity and courage could open doors that power alone could not. In quieter moments, Amara reflected on the journey with gratitude. She understood the weight of the opportunity she had been given and the responsibility to use it wisely. Each success reinforced her belief that ethical leadership, grounded in authenticity and empathy, could reshape not just companies but societies. Her journey showed that even one voice, when guided by courage and principle, could create ripples that transformed entire systems. Her legacy, however, was not built on accolades or recognition, but on the countless lives touched and opportunities created. From a 12-year-old facing humiliation to a young leader inspiring systemic change, Amara's story embodied resilience, vision, and moral courage. She had demonstrated that greatness was not measured by power, wealth, or status, but by the positive impact one could have on others and the ethical standards one upheld. As the audience rose to applaud, Amara smiled, knowing that her journey was far from over. There were more ideas to nurture, more young innovators to mentor, and more systems to transform. Yet in that moment, the room echoed with the triumph of courage over intimidation, principle over arrogance, and integrity over superficial authority. She closed with a simple, yet powerful message. Never underestimate the power of your ideas, your voice, and your integrity. Stand tall, remain true, and use every challenge as an opportunity to change the world, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. The applause was thunderous. Cameras flashed, media recorded, but most importantly, hearts and minds had been moved. Amara had turned humiliation into influence, mockery into movement, and a moment of injustice into a legacy of inspiration. Her journey, though beginning with a moment of scorn, had become a testament to resilience, ethical leadership, and the extraordinary power of one principled individual to create lasting change. And as she stepped off the stage, she carried with her the certainty that the best stories, the ones that truly matter, are those that transform not just a single life, but the world around it. If Amara's story inspired you, imagine what you could achieve when you refuse to be silenced, dismissed, or underestimated. Every idea you have, every challenge you face, and every setback you endure is an opportunity to grow stronger and make a real impact. Don't let anyone tell you that your voice doesn't matter, because it does. Now more than ever, subscribe and join our community where stories of courage, resilience, and triumph come alive. Be the first to witness incredible journeys of ordinary people turning adversity into power. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode that could change your perspective, your mindset, and maybe even your life. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us about a moment when you stood up, refused to back down, or surprised everyone with your courage. Your story could inspire someone else to take that first brave step. Together we rise, we inspire, and we change the world.